Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Tristana Bickford. I'm the department's communications director based out of Santa Fe, and we are excited to have you all joining us here tonight. Both everybody that's here in the Zoom platform with us and those that are watching it live on Facebook. For those of you that are here in Zoom, feel free to type in questions as we go in the Q&A, and we'll either plug them into the conversation as we go or come back and answer those at the end. For those of you on Facebook, we'll try to do the same and keep track of the questions that you guys may have and get those posted. We are recording tonight's session, and we'll get it posted up on the department's YouTube page probably in the next couple of days. The previous 4 sessions are now posted, and you can view those again on the department's YouTube page. So please feel free to check those out if you happen to miss the session and want to go back and review it, or just want some help or to review the process of how to set up your customer account. Let's see. We do have our Spanish translator here as well. So if somebody has a question in Spanish, we can bring Darren into the conversation and help us with that translation. Or you can reach out to us and through email, and we can answer your questions that way. And let's see, a few important dates. We have the big game draw is now open. So it's been open for, I don't know, about 5-6 days now. It opened last Wednesday. And you have until March 16th to apply. If you want to apply for bear and turkey, that deadline's a little bit sooner. So you have until February 9th to apply there. And you have a couple of dates in there for your harvest reports. We'll put all those dates back up here again at the end so you can get those marked down. But now's a great time to start applying. And we wanted to start this conversation off early in the application process. So you had an idea of some of the laws and the regulations that hunters are expected to follow in New Mexico. So we brought on Sergeant Ben Byrd out of Alma. And Ben, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you know way more about you than I do. So.
Okay, good evening. My name is Benjamin Byrd. I'm the sergeant with Mexico Game and Fish out of Ruidoso. I've been with the department going on 19 years now.
And we have officers like you all the way across the state. Can you give us a little bit of overview of where officers are located and kind of how they're spread out across the state?
So we have we have 4 areas in the state. Basically, if you just broke the state into 4, split it north, south, east, west into 4 corners or 4 quarters. And then within those, we have an area office. And within those area offices, there's a captain, and they supervise generally 4 sergeants. And those 4 sergeants have anywhere from 3 to 5 officers working underneath them. We're not really divided by county. We kind of have just some lines that we've drawn for supervisory districts, and that's how our district officers know their boundaries.
That's great. And I'm always amazed that every time I travel and throughout the state, I always hear somebody talking about the local officer, or, hey, I talked to so-and-so and got this information. And when we get those comments on Facebook, it's almost always followed by, oh yeah, I reached out to the local officer. So I know that you guys are essentially on call 24/7 just to take calls and help hunters out. And I know you guys are very, very busy.
Correct. Yeah. So with, being the field officers, we kind of are the face of the department, working with our constituents in the communities, whether it be hunters, other land management agencies, wildlife complaints. They may not be licensed buyers, but they're still dealing with New Mexico's wildlife. So we talk to people in the community that are having issues with wildlife that aren't related to hunting as well. So our guys generally do know a lot of people in their communities, especially the smaller ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's a great point because you guys have, a lot of people think the officers are just out, monitoring for poachers, but man, you guys have a wide variety of tasks that you take on. And then in your spare time that you might have, you're out working with other divisions and teaching classes, helping people learn to shoot firearms or archery equipment, learning survival techniques, teaching them about wildlife, all kinds of stuff that you have going on as well.
Yeah, that's correct. We do a lot of different stuff besides just enforce the law, but it is a very big part of what our job is enforcing Chapter 17 and the rules and regulations from the Game Commission. But we do a lot of other stuff too.
Great. So I want to just jump right in with that. And your comment about Chapter 17 is exactly where I wanted to go first. So where do people go if they just want to get started hunting in New Mexico, and want to start learning the rules and what they need to do to apply for the draw, where do they begin looking for the rules and the statutes that are important to the process?
So the best place to go is to go get a proclamation. We generally do that in two formats. We do it either in a paper format that you can pick up at one of the area offices or our licensed vendors. Generally speaking, like the Walmarts, a Big Five store, or there's other vendors around the state that I'm not going to be aware of, but a lot of our communities have a licensed vendor in them. You can go pick up a hard copy of it, or you can get it off our website, wildlife.state.nm.us. You can go in there and look at the current proclamation. That's the best thing you could do too, because you've got big game proclamations, we've got small game proclamations, we've got a fur bearers rules and information booklet. So those are very important. Most everything that you need to know as a hunter, a fisher, a trapper in New Mexico, you're going to be able to find that in the proclamation.
Yeah, this year's definitely been a hard year, but with the paper shortages, we had to cut back on the number of proclamations or rules and information booklets that we printed. So this year you can only get them at the Game and Fish offices, but they are in offices now in both English and Spanish. So swing by and pick those up. But not quite as convenient as the local store, but with the paper shortage, it was the best we could do. We were worried for a while that we were even going to have a printed version.
Right.
So we're glad to have those out there. And like you mentioned, definitely printing them off of the website. Is there anything that isn't covered in that rules and information booklet that people need to be aware
of? A lot of it, there's some things, depending on where you're going to go hunting, you really need to get a hold of the land management agency, like a ranger district or the BLM field office, in order to find out if there's any particular rules or information that pertain on their side of things to where you're going to be going that's not going to necessarily be covered in the proclamation. We might have something to say that references, to talk to the local ranger district where you're going to go hunt, but you really need to contact those guys to see if there's anything else that they may have in place that we won't enforce, but the other land management agencies will be enforcing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So even if Game and Fish is controlling the hunt or providing statute and regulation for the hunt, you still have to know where you are and what kind of land you're on, if you're on private property, which, wow, that's a whole nother discussion we can jump into here in a little bit. But let's start. So one of the questions I get most when people are applying for the draw is, how do they know if they're a resident in New Mexico?
So the way the statute reads is you have to be a resident, you have to be living in New Mexico for 90 days. You can't claim residency in any other state. So you can't be we have a lot of people that buy homes in New Mexico, but also have a home in another state. Let's just say, for example, Texas, just because you own a home in New Mexico, but live in Texas does not make you a resident in the state of New Mexico. You have to be living here. You have to be here for 90 days. So for the most part, the 90-day rule is the biggest thing. And then outside of that, like I said, if you own property in New Mexico, it doesn't necessarily just make you a resident.
Yeah. So, and then the 90 days, is that before you apply for the draw, or would that 90 days be before you go hunting?
That 90 days would be before you apply for the hunt. Okay. Because at the time that you're applying for the application or applying for the hunt, you are clicking on there that you're a New Mexico resident at that time that you apply, and you're not there yet. So.
Perfect. And is there any open areas that somebody that comes from a military family or that's in the military or a student, is there any waiver in that for those individuals?
Yes, those that are stationed here, like let's just say one of our Air Force bases in New Mexico, we do give them, they show us that, they're basically for hunting purposes, they can apply for New Mexico resident licenses, and the same for students coming in from out of state.
Okay. So that's a great way if you're just here, getting an education, and you can go do some hunting and learn a little bit about the state as well. So right. That's great. Okay. And then when you're looking at the hunt recommendations, one of the things that it comes up right away is a disability status. And so can you talk a little bit about what somebody would need to claim disability?
So we have what we call handicap licenses, and we also have a disabled license. So there's the handicap license. Let's just cover that first. So what that is a license. It's a reduced fee. That's all that really entitles you to, is a reduction in license price. The mobility impaired card, which is what we have specific mobility impaired hunts around the state, depending on which unit it's in. Those mobility impaired card holders, they're allowed a couple provisions that a normal hunter is not. In order to have that mobility impaired card issued to you, you have to apply. If you go to our website and if you go to the Google search form on our website and type in mobility impaired, it'll bring up the form that you have to fill out, have a doctor sign, send that in, it gets verified, and then we will give you a mobility impaired card. One of the things that allows you to do, it allows you to shoot from a vehicle, but not from a road. So you have to be pulled off the road and you cannot shoot from within the right-of-way fence line. So if you're like on a county road or something, there's a right-of-way fence, you cannot shoot from the vehicle inside that right-of-way fence. You have to be on the other side of the right-of-way fence, just like other hunters. But it does allow you to, on say a 2-track road where you could discharge a firearm from within the vehicle and not have to get out of it like other hunters do. So mobility impaired, like I said, there are some opportunities for some hunts just specifically for those guys. The other thing it does allow on the mobility impaired license, if they wound something, it allows somebody else to be able to help them reduce that animal to possession if it's wounded by the hunter. The only real thing to that is they have to use the same weapon type that the hunter's restricted to.
So if the hunter has an archery tag, they can shoot it with a rifle.
Correct.
Ah, that's good. And with all of those, with the military, with the student, and with any of the disability statuses, you do have to provide some sort of paperwork. And I know, especially with the military, that you cannot select those hunts until you have provided that information. So if you do fall in one of those categories, it's important to get that information in as soon as possible so that that can be populated into your account and you can apply for those hunts.
That's correct. Yeah, and then our licensing division does a good job getting all that stuff in place pretty quick so that they can. So if you are a disabled veteran or something, you can take advantage of it. So, and there's 50% license. You get a 50% off your license if you are a veteran in the state of New Mexico. You have to be a New Mexico veteran or a resident of New Mexico in order to get that discount for the veterans.
So can a non-resident qualify for the status, just not for the discount?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd have to go back and look to see if there's any hunts that are specific to them, but you know, the actual discount is made for just New Mexico veterans. So.
Thank you. You just
and there is a disabled veteran, so they do receive a free small game hunting license or game hunting license, and then if they have to still apply for deer or any of the other draw hunts, but they will receive a free deer license if they were successful in the draw and they were a disabled veteran, they would receive the license for free.
Okay, so that's a great way to say thank you for everyone for your service to this country.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to change subjects a little bit, and one of the questions I get the most is regarding our game management unit. And in that regulation booklet, the printed version, the map is so small. How could you possibly know what game unit, what the boundary is for a GMU? So what's the best way to find out where the GMUs are located and the boundaries and how to stay legal and pick a GMU that you're interested in hunting in?
So there's a couple ways. Like you stated, the one in the proclamation is really tiny. You can go to our website and you can search for the map specific to each individual GMU. Makes it a little better. But then with all the mapping programs that are available either on a computer or on something like a smartphone, which a lot of our hunters nowadays have smartphones, you can download a couple apps. One of them would be Onyx, which is something you have to pay for. It's a pretty good app. It's got some functions on it that are different than Carry Maps. Carry Maps is an app that is free. It's in conjunction with the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish and BLM, Bureau of Land Management. They basically write the app every license year. So the map that people have downloaded for this year is going to expire at the end of this license year, March 31st, and it'll open up a new one sometime after April 1st. The good thing about that map is it goes up to date on everything that we have in the department programs. So if we have a unitization in place or an open gate, that is going to update every year. So if something comes new, it's going to show up, or if something is terminated and we lose a unitization for some reason, that will show up on next year's map. The other good thing about it too is it is free. It works off of your cell phone's GPS. So you don't have to have self-service for it to work to show your location, which is pretty handy because the Onyx map, you have to download the maps prior to going out and hunting so that you have the maps if you run out of service. If people want to get the carry maps, it's pretty easy. You go to the Play Store if you have an Android, or the Apple Store if you have an iPhone, and you just search carry maps, download it. And then if you go to or type in, like on your phone on a search, New Mexico BLM hunting maps, it'll take you to their website and it'll show you how to actually open the map so you can use the map for New Mexico.
Oh, interesting. I haven't used carry maps yet, but I'm gonna have to check it out. I've used Onyx myself, just what I learned first.
Right. And Onyx is a great map, but carry maps, the good thing about carry maps, like I said, is it's free. The biggest thing you have to remember is that it's going to delete the map every license year. So you have to go back in there and make sure that you reload that map before you go hunting. So if you haven't, because most of us don't use them, after this hunting season, a lot of people don't look at them much anymore. If they may forget about it till the next season. If you wait till you're actually out hunting, if you don't have service, you're not going to be able to use it.
That's a great tool. So I'll have to be checking that one out.
Yep.
In that, you mentioned that we could gain or lose a unitization. Can you explain that?
So unitizations, the easiest way to explain it, and a lot of people have used them and benefited from them. So the department enters into an agreement with a private landowner and the state land office for the most part. And we agreed to swap some state land for some private land for the purposes of hunting. And it's normally species specific. So we may do it just for deer, or we may do it for, say, dove, or whatever the case may be. That unitization will be explained what is allowed on that property. So what we're doing is we're taking and allowing the private landowner generally to take a piece of state land that is inaccessible to the public hunter. So it's pretty much landlocked. And we're going to take a piece of private land that butts up against some state land and increase the amount of land that a public hunter is going to have access to. The best way to find out where those are, one, they show up on carry maps. They also show up on Onyx too. Most of the Onyx programs show those agreements. The other place you can go to the Mexico State Land Office to their hunting maps. It'll also show them on there. On our website, if you go into the search bar and type in unitization, it'll pull up all the current unitizations. And those are a yearly renewal. So we may have a unitization in place right now that's going to expire at the end of this license year. And depending on the landowner and the department, we do have some with a small unitization with the BLM as well. But if we decide that it's not beneficial, either the landowner decides it's not beneficial or we don't like it, then we may end up terminating that particular unitization. So if you go to our website, generally it'll dang sure be on there before we end up going to this next year's fall hunting season. But you can go in there and you can look up all the unitizations for the state and see if there's one within the GMU that you're applying for or have drawn a tag, and decide if that's somewhere that you want to go hunt.
Oh, interesting. And you also mentioned the Open Gate program, which is a pretty cool program, but will you talk a little bit about how that works?
The Open Gate program is, we use it a little bit for access. It's more, I think, used, at least in the Southeast with my experience, has been used more for fishing access, to where we're paying some private landowners, for a little stretch of stream or something. We stock it and it gives the public another place to fish that they didn't have. That money is from our habitat management access validation stamp, which is something that is already included in the price of the license. And that money is taken and used to negotiate with those landowners to buy access for hunting and fishing for the sportsmen of New Mexico on places that they normally wouldn't get to go.
That's great. And I know there's some hunting properties out there, but like you said, I'm more familiar with the fishing on the Open Gate and,
right.
Rancho Grande Ponds over by Reserve. And I know we had one on Verendo Creek outside of Roswell. And so I'm sure there's some for hunting. I just am more familiar with the fishing side on those properties as well.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's another thing, like I said, the Carry Maps app, it shows up all those Open Gate properties and the unitizations. And then our website, you can find everything that we have. And it's important to go back and look at our website, because if you're going to go utilize a unitization, you have to know what species that unitization is actually valid for. And there are going to be some prohibitions. So like on an open gate, whenever you go into the open gate, it's going to have a sign, generally an orange sign, and it's going to have what you can and can't do. All those, like the open gates, you have to have a license in order to enter onto them. Since, you know, it is for fishing, you're going to have a license from the department, and there's going to be prohibitions on what you can and can't do. Like there's no overnight camping, no campfires, whatever the landowner and the department agrees on. So it's important that you stop and read those to make sure you don't violate the provisions that are written on the signs where it's posted.
Absolutely. Okay, so once you have looked at all those tools and kind of identified a place in the state where you're going to go hunt, or that you would like to go hunt, that's what you're going to apply for. And I know you can apply for different areas throughout the state as well. So, you know, sometimes you want to apply in the northern part, sometimes you may want a warmer hunt, so you apply down south in the winter. You know, those can definitely be mixed and matched. But I think the next thing that I look at, especially, is the weapon type. So we have 3 different weapon types that we list out in the rules and information booklet. And can you talk a little bit about those, and when can you shoot archery equipment and when can you shoot a rifle?
Okay, so if you're looking at a proclamation, you're going to have like DER, which is going to be your deer hunts. We're going to have DER-1- something, and those last 3 numbers will coincide with the unit that you're hunting in. Those hunts, you can use a centerfire rifle, and you're going to be able to use a 22 caliber or larger projectile. And you can also use a weapon of a lesser of a weapon. So you could use a muzzleloader on a rifle hunt, okay? Or you can use a archery equipment if you so choose. If you do a rifle hunt and you want to use a bow, you can do that. Crossbows also become legal in those hunts. On the muzzleloader hunts, which are going to be the DER-3 hunts, so it'll have like between DER be 3, then a dash and 3 more numbers. Those will be your muzzleloader hunts. It's going to have to be a 45 caliber or larger projectile on a muzzleloader. No, it's going to be black powder or a black powder substitute. There is no smokeless powder allowed in a muzzleloader hunt. And then we do have a couple units that we have restricted muzzleloader hunts. There's like one in the southeast area, GMU 33, and there's one for deer up north. I believe it's 52. Don't quote me on that, but where you're going to have a few more restrictions on the weapon type that you can use. Like it's going to have to be open sights. It's going to have to be a patch round ball, no sabots, things of that nature. No inline ignition. So for like the more traditionalist muzzleloader hunter, that's the hunt that they generally like to put in for. And then on your so on a muzzleloader hunt, you could still downgrade to like a bow or a crossbow. And then on your archery hunts, the only way that you'll be able to use anything besides just a bow, if you were going to try to use a crossbow, you'd have to be mobility impaired. So that is an allowance for that.
So it just gets a little bit more restrictive with the different weapon types, which makes a lot of sense. And you can get as technical as you want to get. In most cases, you can get as technical, or, you know, I applied for a muzzleloader hunt because the odds were a little bit better, and I was going to shoot an inline because I'm not as experienced with the muzzleloader as I am with other firearm types.
You know, one other thing too, on the centerfire rifle hunts, you know, with the 22 caliber or larger, you know, with modern sporting rifles in today's time, there's a lot of people using them for hunting. Just make sure that you're not using full metal jackets. Make sure the ammunition that you're picking, the bullet in it is not a full metal jacket. So no tracers or full metal jackets are allowed.
And are there any other restrictions on the weapon type or the type of ammo that you can use, except for in those units that you mentioned that are very specific for traditional set muzzleloaders?
Not really. I mean, it's really just a caliber restriction. So we know 22 caliber or larger for big game. And then outside of that, not really. I mean, you just, you know, muzzleloaders, 45 caliber or larger. And then, like I said, if you get in that restrictive muzzleloader, it's going to have a few more rules. You just got to make sure you understand those rules before you go hunting.
And if somebody has questions, I don't want to get too in the weeds to every specific caliber and bullet out there. I know you are quite the expert, and I would be happy to connect people with you if they have a specific question about a caliber or a specific ammo load or something. But Okay, so I think weapon types are definitely important, and I guess I kind of listed these way out the way that I look at the rules and information book. But one of the questions we've been getting quite a bit, and this is going to be mainly from non-residents, but I do think there are some residents that may apply with an outfitter as well. So I hear complaints from people that they got an outfitter that they're not totally happy with, or that they're looking for somebody who is a reputable outfitter. So how can somebody find out if there is a list of certified outfitters in New Mexico?
Just like we talked, like some of the other answers, our website, we're going to have a current list of New Mexico outfitters on there. As far as finding one that is reputable, I think it's best. I mean, if you're coming in here from, normally it's out-of-state residents that are going to be hiring an outfitter. There are some in-state residents that do it, but doing your homework, making sure that the guy that you're getting ready to give a whole bunch of money to is up to snuff. I mean, if looking at their references, talking to some of their past hunters, looking at them online, seeing, what other people are saying about them, just do your homework. There is a lot of times that hunters will call us as the local officer and say, hey, I'm looking at putting in a elk hunt in GMU 36 and I want to know what outfitter to put in with. We cannot give recommendations, seeing how the department governs outfitters. We're not allowed to give recommendations one way or another about an outfitter. So if you call one of the local game wardens to ask them who you should book your hunt with, they're not going to tell you. So do your due diligence. It's a lot of money, it costs a lot of money to do it. Make sure that you're doing your research to find somebody that is reputable.
And what does somebody have to do to become a certified outfitter and to get on that list?
For the outfitters, that I would say with the outfitter rule, if there's people that are going to be interested in becoming an outfitter, it's probably a conversation that would probably be best handled with our guide and outfitter registrar in Santa Fe, just because there is some stuff that they're going to have to go through to become a New Mexico registered outfitter. And so I think I don't know that I think that topic might be better issued or handled on a smaller scale, just because a lot of people, I don't remember how many outfitters we have in the state of New Mexico, but it's not really a ton. We have a lot of guides. We probably have 100 and something registered outfitters, but.
What is the difference between a guide and an outfitter?
The outfitter is the one that's responsible for booking the hunt, making sure that everything's in place for the hunt, signing contracts. So you have to have contracts. If you're gonna apply for a hunt with the New Mexico registered outfitter, and you're gonna go into that 10% pool. So 84% of our licenses go to New Mexico residents, 10% go to New Mexico registered outfitters, and then the other 6% go to non-residents. So if you're going to go into that 10% pool, if you're going to apply in that pool, you have to have a contract before applying with an outfitter. And there's nothing saying if you apply with an outfitter and you decide you don't like him, you can get released from that outfitter. He has to agree to release you, he or she, and then you can enter into a new contract with a new outfitter. But you do, if you draw that license under the 10% outfitter pool, you do have to use an outfitter on that hunt. So even if it's not the one you originally applied with, you still have to use one for the hunt later.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that, but that makes complete sense now that you say that. And if you apply as a non-resident and you go into that 6% pool and then you think, wow, I just haven't gone out to New Mexico and haven't been able to scout, can you go back and apply with an outfitter?
Yes, you mean if you've already drawn your license?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, for sure. I mean, if you decide that, you got into more than you can handle and you don't have time to come out and scout, or the hunt's going to be more than what you want to take on by yourself, you can hire an outfitter at any time. Like I said, that list is on there on the website. You could go through that list. If you want to use somebody local, it lists the name of the person that owns the business, the name of the business, and a contact phone number and an address for them, so you can get a hold of those guys. But today with social media as well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can see on Facebook or Instagram and try to kind of figure out, dwindle down to who you want to use on a hunt.
Great. Thank you. I know we get a lot of questions about that process and trying to help non-residents work through it. And I've even had a few residents that are interested in that 10% pool, and right. Hopefully right. They try their chances where they do. But
right.
Okay, so just looking at the application process, is there anything else people need to think about legal wise before they apply?
The one thing I would say on you pretty much know if you're going to be hunting when you draw a license for, let's say, deer, elk, or Barbary sheep, the ones that are more hunted on, even antelope now for with the way that the licensing system is, you have that option to choose a habitat improvement stamp or not. It's a $10 stamp, and you have to have that stamp to hunt, fish, or trap on BLM or Forest Service lands. A lot of our hunts are done on those lands. So if you don't have that, it's a violation. It's something that you potentially, if you run into an officer, you may end up receiving a citation for. And it's just as simple as thinking about what you're going to do, where you're going to be going, and buying that stamp before you go. If you failed to buy it and you look at your license, you get ready to go on your hunt, you can always go back into your account and buy the license, and you can carry proof of it, especially if you have like a smartphone, by just taking a screenshot to show that you bought, to show proof that you bought the license before you started hunting. Habitat stamps, I would say, is one of the more common violations you run into. It's been around a long time, and you basically have to opt out of not buying it. So if you think you're going to hunt, fish, or trap on BLM or Forest Service lands, buy it.
I always tell people when they call, it's better just to have it, because
Yes.
I'm the kind that I would forget to go back and buy it. So I always just get everything I can right up front and
Yes.
not worry about it.
Yep.
Okay, so after you apply and hopefully you're successful in the draw, part of that application process is that you have to buy your hunting license, or your small game hunting licenses, as some people refer to them. What all is that license good for?
So the small game hunting license? So the small game license, you're going to be able to go hunt dove, quail, pheasant, squirrels. You can hunt waterfowl. You are going to need, if you're going to go hunt on like any of the migratory bird species, if we're hunting dove or waterfowl or something like that, you're going to need a duck stamp for the waterfowl. And then you're also going to need the HIP stamp, which is it's a federal requirement. It's free. It's a free stamp. You just have to get it, basically a HIP number. And that's how they track how many migratory birds that the hunters are harvesting. So, but there's still a lot of opportunity. If you, like you said, if you put in for a hunt, you didn't draw anything, there's still a lot of other species in the state that you can go hunt. Depending on the year, the dove hunting has been pretty good the last couple of years. Our quail numbers are kind of up and down. So if you're going to go quail hunting in the southern half of the state, it would probably be better to get a hold of one of the local guys to figure out what the quail population's doing, especially if you're a non-resident, because it's a long ways to come. But New Mexico does have some really good quail hunting, especially on certain years.
That's awesome. And I'll put Casey Cardinal, our resident game bird biologist. She's going to be on next week, so I'll put her on the spot and see if she can get some predictions on the quail population. But I hear a lot of comments that hunting license is non-refundable, and I can guarantee it's going to a good cause no matter what. But man, there's so much that you can get out and do, whether it's waterfowl or squirrel hunting or grouse hunting, and get out and go for a hike and take your gun with you, and it's just worth it.
No, for sure. There's a lot of species you can hunt off that license, and if you're an avid outdoorsman, even if you didn't draw a big game license, there's lots of stuff you can do in this state with that game hunting license.
And even big game, there's quite a few species that you can get over the counter with Barbary sheep, javelina, let's see what else, ibex, bear, cougar. There's a bunch that you can get over the counter and go hunting.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. I want to jump to the questions really quick, and then I want to come back to our outline. But one of the questions we have is a fairly lengthy one about the preference point system, which we don't have here in New Mexico. But do you know if that is set in statute?
That the preference point system?
Yeah. Or that we don't have a preference point system?
I don't know that it's we don't have anything in rule or anything that's that it's just completely random. I can't actually say that it would be. I don't think it is. I don't remember off the top of my head if it's something in statute.
Okay.
So
we can look into that one. I wasn't totally sure either, so we can look into that one and get a response in the next few days. But okay, jumping back in, one of the things that I've seen and I've heard people do when they're out and they're scouting is spotlighting. And so can you go spotlighting in New Mexico? And I guess what I'm thinking is, using a spotlight out the window, or a handheld artificial light that you would use out a car window or something.
Right. So the way that the statute reads is you have to be in an area where big game or livestock can be found. You have to have an implement capable of killing or harvesting big game or livestock. And then you have to have, casting rays of artificial light. So you have to have those parts there. So could you legally go out and look at wildlife and be legal? Yes, if you didn't have a firearm or a bow or something else that was capable of killing big game or livestock, you wouldn't be in violation of the statute, but you probably are going to get stopped if you're seen by a game warden, because there still is reasonable suspicion that you are spotlighting at that point, because at that point, we don't know that you don't have a firearm in the vehicle. So could you do it? Yes. But it is potentially something that you would get stopped for.
All right. And if you chose to do that, to make sure you don't have a firearm of any sort or archery equipment in the vehicle with you.
Correct. Yeah, because as soon as even if you had just a handgun in the front seat, you meet the elements of that crime. So therefore you would be in violation of the spotlighting statute.
Okay. That's good to know. That was something I liked to do growing up, and we go out and look for glowies.
Right.
And I did grow up in another state, but that was one of my favorite things when I was little, to go look for glowies with the family.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. One of the other things that comes up pretty frequently when people are going out scouting is the land status, and specifically with state land, because there's a specific scouting season on state land. Is that correct?
Correct. So you can scout up to 14 days prior to your hunt. And then, if you're, depending on when your hunt is, you could be out there hunting another species, just like we were talking about some of the small game species. You could be out there hunting those species even prior to that, depending on when your hunt is. So, but in order to access state lands, what we have an agreement with the state land office. Sportsmen's dollars are leasing those lands for sportsmen. And so the only ways you can access state land is you have to have a valid New Mexico hunting license or a recreational permit from the state land office. That's the only two ways you can legally access state lands, unless it's under like a recreational lease through the state land office. Which there's some of those in the state, like Moon Mountain around Ruidoso a couple of years ago was entered to a recreational lease. And so that's just for the people that come into Ruidoso or the local residents to ride bikes, that kind of stuff on. But if you're going to go to state land, if you're going to be on state land, you have to have one of those two things to legally be on it. It's different than BLM or Forest Service land is.
That was my next question. So with BLM or Forest Services, are there any stipulations there that you have to have?
To go scouting?
Yeah.
No, there's not. I would say, there's on any of those other land management agencies, there's going to be certain restrictions. So like we talked about earlier, it's important if you're going to go into a certain national forest that you make sure you know what the rules are pertaining on their side. It may not be a New Mexico Game and Fish issue, but it may be a United States Forest Service issue or a Bureau of Land Management issue. So make sure that you're aware of where you're going and what the rules are pertaining to those lands before you go. But as far as just being able to go onto national forest, there's really not any restrictions unless there's some specific areas or something they're just trying to keep people out of. The biggest thing with those is probably vehicle usage, closed roads, things like that.
That makes sense. And I want to come back to vehicles and OHVs and some of those here in a minute, but okay. We'll circle back around. Also looking at state lands, so Game and Fish owns quite a bit of property across New Mexico. And so is there any stipulations or anything that you have to scout on those properties?
If you're going, well, so depending on the actual wildlife management area, there are going to be some different rules. So like on some of our prairie chicken areas, you can go hunting on them, but you've got to use non-toxic shot. If you're wanting to access, we have multiple department properties throughout the state. If you're going to want to try to access them, the best thing you can do is get a hold of that area office or the local game and fish officer and figure out what the rules are pertaining to that department land, because they are going to be different, right? So we have some that are lakes, we have some that are prairie chicken areas, we have some that we have draw permits for bears. They're all different. So if you're going to access one of those areas, the best thing you can do is get a hold of somebody locally and figure out what the rules are before you go in there.
That's perfect. I think I was once told that you can't do anything on game and fish property unless it's put in rule that you can.
Yeah.
So it's better to call and find out what you can
Correct.
do and really read that information.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, one of the newer technology items, and maybe it's not that new, but it seems new overall, is drones. And so can you use drones or any aircraft when you're scouting or when you're hunting?
No, you cannot. I think it's just a simple no, you can't. So if the rule's written, I can pull it up real quick, but the way that the rule's written, you cannot use them. So it's within regulations. So regulation is what the Game Commission, that's the rules that they set. And 3110, I don't know if most of this stuff is published in our proclamation, but you can find all these other statutes, rules, and regulations online if you so choose to look for them. But within our regulation, it says it shall be unlawful to hunt for or take or assist in the hunting for or taking of any protected species with the use of information regarding location of any protected species gained from the use of any drone at any time. So with the way that reads, you can't use drones to scout any time of day.
Okay, that's a good clarification and a question that seems to be coming up more and more. Okay, and then my next question, it seems to be a hot topic across the West now. In Arizona recently outlawed game cameras, and so did Utah. But do we have any stipulations on the use of game cameras, either scouting or during your hunts?
Yes. So we still allow the use of game cameras. The biggest thing is we don't allow the use of game cameras that transmit, and I would say that are transmitting, because I don't own any of them, but I would suspect that you could take a Wi-Fi or a cellular game camera and turn off that function that is not transmitted, and then it'd be legal to use it as long as it's not transmitting. So it'd be just like a regular old school game camera that you just put on tree, then you actively have to go check the game camera, pull the card off of it to see what photos are on it. So yes, it is illegal to use ones that transmit.
Okay, all right. And really, are there any other restrictions as far as can you put them over a water source or along a game trail or anything like that?
Yes. Yeah, you can place them anywhere that you pretty much have a legal right to be. So.
All right, jumping in, or I'm going to jump back a little bit into some of the land status stuff. And one of the questions that comes up is hunting on private property. And so can you hunt on private property? And if so, what do you need to hunt on private property?
Yes, you can hunt on private property. So it depends on the species that you're hunting, but the one thing that you always need to hunt on private property is written permission from the landowner. Like we talked about with land status and some of the maps that are available now, you shouldn't end up on private property unknowingly. There is tools out there to keep you off of other people's private property. So you need to know where you're at. As a hunter, it's your responsibility to know where you're at. So utilize those maps. If you're going to go hunt private property, make sure that you receive permission from the landowner. And then as far as private property and licenses, so antelope is over the counter. You can go buy a private land license over the counter for antelope, but you have to have private property to hunt on. So you need to go get that permission before you go buy the license. Deer is the same way. Elk, within our elk system, there is the opportunity to buy licenses that are good just for private lands. So, but that's a little bit different whenever you receive those elk licenses. But make sure you have written permission with you while you're hunting, whenever you're hunting private property.
Okay, so written permission, and then for those antelope and deer, the landowner has an authorization code that's essentially an access code, and then you come and purchase your license from Game and Fish, right?
Not on antelope and deer. So
Okay.
antelope, you can just buy them over the counter. Deer, you can buy them over the counter. You just have to have written permission from somebody. That license is not really valid until you receive written permission from somebody. You have to have somebody's private property to go hunt on, since it's only good for private property.
Makes sense. And one of the
the authorizations come from the elk system.
Okay, that's where I got confused. One of the questions that came in related to this topic is, what if there's public land that's surrounded by private land? Can you go in and hunt the public parcel?
Well, I guess I would say it depends. And the only reason I say that is if there was you have to have a legal way of getting to that public land. So if the public land if it had a county road going through it, then you have the legal right to be on that county road. So you could stop on the county road and access that public land. If the county road, or there's no other, if you don't have a legal way of getting there, so if the county road stops or it's on private and there's even say 20 yards of private land to that public land, you cannot legally cross that, especially if it is legally posted according to the criminal trespass statute, it'd be a violation of criminal trespass. So you cannot access across somebody's private land to public land. You have to have permission to do that as well.
The written permission just to cross. Okay. And then, so speaking of roads, you had mentioned earlier that you couldn't shoot from a road that had a fence, a right-of-way fence. Are there any other restrictions from shooting from a road?
So you cannot shoot from any public maintained roads, whether it's like graded, paved, like a county road that's routinely maintained, or even like a paved road. You cannot shoot from the surface of that road. You have to be off that surface of the road in order to discharge a firearm or shoot at it with a bow or a muzzleloader. If there's a right-of-way fence present, you have to be on the other side of the right-of-way fence.
Okay.
That's really the two stipulations. If there is no right-of-way fence present, you just have to be off the road.
That's something to keep in mind when you're out there and driving into an area and you see something that's just quick and exciting. Right. But you have to think about where you're actually located.
Right. And I will say that our proclamation, going back to proclamation, it states that in there what you can and can't do. So especially like it's unlawful to in that section, it's very important that you read that because it'll tell you what you can and can't do as in regards to shooting from a road.
Yeah. I find that most of the questions that come in, I'm going to guess that you get those same things when you get phone calls, is that I can typically copy from that page and paste it and the answer is already there. So I know that a lot of the information is duplicated out of there, but we do get quite a few questions that, can be answered just reading that one page or that one section in the book.
For sure. Yeah.
So jumping until after you harvest. So hopefully you're lucky enough to get drawn and go out there and harvest an animal. When do you have to have that animal tagged for a big game species? When do you have to tag that animal?
You're supposed to tag it immediately after harvesting the animal. So once you reduce that animal to your possession, you go up there, really before you start doing anything with it, you should tag it. It's good practice to go ahead and do it right away. That way you don't forget. Everybody knows they need to tag your animal right away or need to tag it. But there's a lot of times hunters will forget, they get caught up in the moment. They start taking photos, they high five each other, everybody's happy. And then 3 hours later, the animal's still not tagged. So if you can get in the habit of just doing it right away, it just makes things a lot easier on the hunters, especially.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was thinking absolutely.
And so with tagging, we've got two forms of tagging, right? So we've got the paper licenses, and then we've also got e-tags. And the choice you make whenever you apply for the license, you get to choose which one you want to do. If you decide later, if you end up getting the paper license, you're pretty much stuck with it. But if you choose the e-tag option, we can change that back to a paper license later before the hunt, and then basically just shut down the e-tag. So you don't end up with two licenses. But if you're going to do an e-tag, so just so people are aware, you're still going to have to tag your animal. The e-tag doesn't do anything that doesn't allow you not to physically tag your animal. The paper tag, you're going to get the traditional license mailed to you. It's going to have the months, the dates. You're going to have to notch it out. You have to tag it at the hock tendon for the carcass tag, and then if it's like let's just say a deer, you're going to have to tag the antlers, right? It's going to have an antler or horn tag on it. If you choose the e-tag option, you have to do the same tagging. You just now have to make sure that you have something with you in order to write down, like you're gonna have to have your CIN number, the date and time of the kill, and there's a little special unique code that comes with that e-tag. Whenever you punch it and say, I want to tag my animal, you have to write all that on something like flagging or duct tape or something. You're still gonna have to tag your animal. So it's not that it's just electronic tagging, you tag it on your phone, you're done. there still is a physical requirement for you to tag your animal, just like if you'd have got the paper license.
Okay. That's yeah, it's interesting. I'm such a fan of having the paper in my hand, but technology is advancing. So
right. They're both handy. They're both handy in different ways. I've messed with the e-tag a little bit, and it's a little different, but it's been handy and also. So
absolutely. And I know for those last minute hunts, if you wanted an over the counter Barbary sheep or something, it's great to just get that and go.
Yes.
Download the app and download your tag and head out to the field. So
right.
So when you're out there in your field dressing the animal and you're planning your pack out or back to the truck, whatever it may be, how much meat do you have to take out of the field with you?
So you have to take all the edible portions. Really, that constitutes being all 4 quarters. Back straps, tenderloins, and then majority of the neck meat. There's not really enough. Some hunters will remove meat from the ribs, some won't, but that's really not going to be a requirement. Let's just say by game warden looking at a potential waste of game case for rib meat on an antelope. But you have to take out all 4 quarters, back straps, and tenderloins. And then obvious bloodshot meat, you don't have to take out of the field. If you happen to shoot an animal through both front shoulders and there's a lot of loss of meat on that, especially depending on the size of the animal, there's going to be more percentage of meat lost on like an antelope versus an elk. But if it's obvious bloodshot meat, you don't have to take that out.
And if I have a larger animal that's going to take me multiple trips, what do I do with the tag? Do I take it out on my first trip? Do I leave it with the remaining meat in the field? What do I do with my tag?
Take it out with the first trip and leave it with the meat that goes into the vehicle or camp or wherever you're taking it and placing it. When you move it to the field, that's where the tag needs to go with it.
Okay, that's great. Then you get it to the vehicle and don't have to worry about it the rest of the trip. Right. And then if you leave there and you head to a butcher or taxidermist, what do you have to leave them some sort of paperwork, I'm assuming, so that they, what do you have to give them?
So according to the rule, you're gonna have to leave them. You need to leave them some of your information, right? You need to tell them, who you are, the hunter, license number. You need to leave kind and number of game parts that you are leaving there. So if you're leaving off, deer meat or whatever, the head, the date and GMU where the game or fur bearer was lawfully taken, the lawful possessor's name, phone number, address, hunting, fishing, trapping license number, and then the reason why you left it there, which would be for like taxidermy or meat processing. So generally, most of the taxidermists and meat processors will have some kind of form, and they should have everything on there that they can just fill in the blanks with what you have to provide to them. So as far as the hunter's requirement, it should be pretty easy depending on who you're taking it to. They should just ask you a few simple questions, take some stuff off of your license information, and then should be good to go.
That's great. So I want to change subjects just a little bit and talk about vehicles and off-highway vehicles or ATVs or whatever acronym you prefer for the vehicle that you use while you're hunting or while you're scouting. But is there anywhere that you can find a list of where you can and cannot drive, especially with road access? Where can you drive a vehicle or an off-highway vehicle or an ATV, and where can't you drive it?
Okay, so there is, kind of going back to what I talked about before, a good place to always start is if you're going to go to a certain national forest, it'd probably be good to get a hold of their ranger district and figure out what their rules are. Right. So there's generally some kind of travel management plan in that national forest. They're going to have a travel management map, which is going to show you what the open and closed roads or trails are. And then that'll help you keep yourself out of trouble from riding down closed roads. As far as, with the OHVs and the ability to ride them on pavement now, a lot of municipalities or county governments have gone in and created an ordinance that allows operation of them on pavement. The best place to find that, if you're going to take your OHV, or if you live somewhere and you're wondering if you can ride your OHV on pavement or what the rules surrounding that are, if you go to our website, go under the OHV tab, and I believe it's under rules and, I don't know if it's rules and penalties, laws and rules. If you go under there, you can go search through there and it'll have all the ordinances that have been passed by the municipality or the county, or even the Transportation Commission, and you can figure out what you can and can't do. So they're all going to be in there. They're all fairly similar. There's some stuff that has to be similar between all of them, but the counties might want to do something a little bit different on where you can or cannot ride. Let's just say in a certain, like Village of Ruidoso, there's certain places you can't ride them. It'll state it inside that. So you need to make sure you go there and read that before you come. The other probably big thing is know where your boundaries are, because we end up with a lot of people that ride outside of those boundaries, and it's kind of tricky because the license plates say on highway, which you can't just go ride it on a highway because you have it registered for an on highway vehicle. If you got an on highway plate, doesn't mean you can go ride down any highway in the state of New Mexico. There has to be something in place that allows it. So, and those governments, the county government or the city council or something's going to have to pass an ordinance to allow it.
So really, it's important to know who owns the land that you're on, whether it's county or Forest Service, and what forest, and then go to that entity to make sure that you are following all the stipulations that they have in place.
Right. Yeah, because it can get confusing, right? Because a lot of these places you go from city limits to the county. So just, I mean, if you spend a little bit of time and try to research it and learn before you go, it generally ends up being a lot better and help keep you out of trouble. So, okay. And most everything's, there's a lot of stuff, you know, if we're talking about like being on the national forest, you know, there are certain forests that have OHV specific trails. Just, you know, go get a map, stop at the Forest Service office, buy a map. Some of the apps have some of those trails and stuff on them, so you can utilize that as well. But do a little research before you go to make sure. So that I think the that know before you ride website, you know, I mean, if you do your due diligence and go look for what you can and can't do, it'll save you potentially some trouble down the road.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of information on that before you ride website. And it's, if anybody's writing that down, it's before, and the number 4 before, and the letter U, and not typed out. So before you ride .gov, and you can get that directly off the Game and Fish website. Right. One of the questions we got about OHVs and the registration specifically are, can I use my OHV as is if it is licensed and has an off-road stamp from another state, or do you have to get a New Mexico tag, stickers, permits, etc. for the OHV?
No, we will take it from another state. Yeah.
Great. And then can you drive off-road to retrieve a large animal?
So if you're on private land, yes. If you're on the public lands, like most of the stuff down here, I'm more familiar with the southeastern part of the state, the Forest Service and the BLM lands down here. You cannot drive off road to retrieve on any of the state lands throughout the state. So I would say if you're hunting in, let's just say the north end of the state on one of those national forests, I would probably say that there's going to be some kind of prohibition against traveling off road. So that's, like I said, you need to check with that forest before you go. But I think everybody's kind of getting on the same page as far as ranger districts. So I think everybody's kind of going away from allowing any kind of off-road travel, even for retrieval of game. So I would say probably not, unless you're on private property. But make a phone call. Like I said, the Lincoln National Forest, you can't drive off-road to retrieve. The BLM field offices down here, like out of Roswell and Carlsbad, you can't drive off-road to retrieve. So
that's good to know. One more thing to double check before you go.
Yes.
And I want to jump into a couple of questions, but I have to say that a lot of people are big fans of yours, Ben. We have comments both in Zoom and on Facebook that say you're the man, none better than you, and that you're an excellent officer and that you've helped people a lot. So thank you very much for that. Okay. So a couple of the questions that have come in and of topics that we have already covered. Are you supposed to do anything about the sex of the animal, or what do you need to have to prove sex of the animal?
So it depends on the species. I don't know if we want to get into every species, but you know, if we're supposed to be harvesting, let's just say mature deer, the antlers of that deer will be sufficient for proof of sex. If we're going to harvest a cow elk, you either have to keep parts of the female genitalia, or you have to keep the scalp and ears all as one piece. So it's different by species. So and it will have it in the proclamation If you go into the proclamation and you're going to go hunt antelope, it'll tell you what you have to have for proof of sex. So make sure you read that, because like I said, it changes. Each species is not the same. So.
And it gets even more complicated when you get into waterfowl and some of the migratory birds. So definitely double check those regulations.
Yes. Yeah. And if, like I said, if anybody has a question, call us. We'd rather talk to you before you go out there instead of run into you with an issue.
Absolutely. And a good point with that is to call sooner rather than later, because when hunting season gets here, you are in the field a lot. And I think that's probably an understatement. So it's better to, to start planning now, or as soon as you know you got drawn, start making those phone calls and those contacts sooner rather than later.
Right.
Another question we got is, are there any rules, regulations, or permits for non-hunting companions, as far as can they just tag along with a hunter?
Yes. The only thing I'd say is the way that the state land agreement is, I think I'd have to go back and look for sure, but I think it's 3 non-hunters are allowed to go with you under that license. But other than that, with the exception of, like accessing White Sands Missile Range, they limit the number of people you can go with you. But if you're hunting National Forest or BLM, I guess you can take whoever you want to. So, or as many of them.
And I do think game and fish properties, at least some of them, have rules with how many people can go per license, but that's a good one to go back and check before you go up there.
Right.
Okay, the next question, and it's a multi-piece question, but you're used to those from me throwing them at you for the last hour. So can you talk about the limitations specific to archery elk hunting? For example, can you use a bow-mounted electronic rangefinder, or illuminated sights, magnified sights, and radio technology between spotters and hunters?
Oh, so radio technology is easy. There's no restriction on that. I will just look at our rule. So I'm just going to read. So this is directly from our rule. Like I said earlier, this is what the Game Commission created. So the definition of a bow shall mean any compound, ring curve, or longbow which is not equipped with a mechanical device, a draw lock, which locks the bowstring at full draw. Sights on bows shall not project light. However, illuminated pins, reticles, and scopes of any magnification are allowed. So that basically kind of sums it up on what you can and can't use.
All right.
You just can't have anything on the bow that's projecting light out in front of you. That's what I'm saying. If your pins are illuminated, that's fine. It just cannot project light.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so jumping back, I think that as all of our questions for now, and I'll keep an eye in case somebody types in another one, but I want to talk a little bit about what to do if you are out in the field and you suspect someone is poaching, or if you hear of somebody poaching, what do you do? How do you report that?
So one of the best ways to do it is through Operation Game Thief, 1-800-432-GAME. You can call that number. The good thing about that is you remain anonymous. There is the ability to receive an award depending on the species. If we're able to find somebody and file charges on them, we will pay you a reward for that information. So that's one way. Another way, you can call sheriff's office, the local sheriff's office. They can kind of route that call. You can call New Mexico State Police. They'll route that call to whoever's working that day. Or if you happen to know the phone number to one of the local officers, just call them. But probably one of the easiest ways, especially if with the reward money offered through OGT, is to call that number. Or you can also go online and fill out an Operation Game Thief report. It may be something that you saw, and this is after the fact, and you can fill it out online and remain anonymous on that as well. So
absolutely, and it's a great program. What information, ideally, what information should someone get if they suspect of a poaching incident?
Well, definitely we don't ask people to get involved, especially with the law enforcement aspect of it. So, we're not asking you to confront anybody, but as far as being a witness, a potential witness, or just giving us some information that we can work off of, if we can get a license plate, if you can get us a license plate or maybe in a photo, everybody's got a phone these days. You can take a picture of the person, or you can take a picture of the truck or a picture of the license plate. But like I said, don't put yourself in harm's way. Just do whatever you feel is comfortable, but we can do a lot with a license plate, and that generally allows us to at least start the investigation on know who we're looking for.
Great. And I'm guessing GPS coordinates, that kind of thing is useful.
Very, yes. Yep. Very good. Very useful.
And then knowing that we're humans and humans make mistakes, if somebody is out hunting and they truly make a mistake, what's the best course of action, for them to self-report?
Be honest, call us, let us know, tell us what happened. You can call, a lot, either the area office if it's Monday through Friday, or New Mexico State Police, and they can find the officer in the area that it happened in. And then we can go out and visit with the person that had the violation, kind of figure out what happened. But you're right, mistakes happen. So best thing you could do is just turn yourself in and let us figure out what happened and go from there.
Absolutely. We've all been there at some point in our life, whether it's hunting related or something else. But
right.
I have one more question that came in, and then I'm ready to wrap everything up. I know I told you it'd be about an hour, and we've gone over, so I appreciate the time. But going back to muzzle loaders, can you talk about what cannot be used, such as for ignition, optics, caliber, sabots, any of that kind of stuff? Will you just talk about muzzle loaders again?
So did they ask specifically about like restricted muzzle loaders, or just?
No, it's just about muzzle loaders in general.
Okay. So I'm just so I don't misspeak, I'm going to read this off of our definition of the muzzleloader. So shall mean those sporting arms in which the charge and projectile, or projectiles, because you could use a muzzleloader you could use a muzzleloading shotgun if you wanted to, let's just say for upland game, are loaded through the muzzle. Only black powder of equivalent black powder substitute may be used. Use of smokeless powder is prohibited. So as far as like optics, like a scope or something like that, you can put a scope on it unless you're hunting a restricted muzzleloader hunt. So the biggest thing is no smokeless powders are allowed, and then you have to load it through the muzzle. So.
Okay, and then a few more questions.
Okay.
Can you set up a permanent blind on a tank or a water hole on public land? Is it first come, first serve? Who hunts that tank?
First come, first serve, but you can't. I don't know what they mean by permanent, but you can't go build a structure on public land.
Is there a length of time that you can or cannot have one set up around a water tank?
We don't have necessarily a actual length of time other than, like the scouting stuff on state land. But I would say, be reasonable. A lot of people use pop-up blinds, but you can go pop it up and put up a couple days before. You can't go build an actual structure on public lands or state trust lands. So, but as far as an actual number of days, we don't have anything that says, regards that in number of days, but I'd say be reasonable with it. So, yeah. And be respectful of other hunters. There's a lot of people doing a lot of scouting, so I know that some of those water holes, but especially depending on the time of year and the rainfall that we've got, those water holes are a little more valuable. So, but be respectful with the other guys that you're hunting with, or gals. So.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of land in the state.
Yeah.
And one more question about state land. If you happen to drive up to a piece of state land and the gates are locked, what should a person do?
Get a hold of us. You could get a hold of us or the state land office, and depending on the actual piece of property, you may or may not get the gate opened up. There is going to be some gates, there may be access points to that. And that's something that we did within that Carry Maps app. We have identified a bunch of the access points into state land. And so if you're running that app, you can see where you can get into a lot of that country. And some gates that are going to be locked, they're going to stay locked. But if you have a question on it, call us. We'll come out, take a look at it, and figure it out. Because some of the roads on state land are locked, but they may be an oil or gas lease, or they may, especially with all these wind farms going up, they may be a road that the wind farm put up. And that is not a road that is under our agreement for hunters use. that is a lease road for the power company or like the wind company or oil and gas company. And that's for their use only. So we're not going to go get one of those gates unlocked because it's not our access point.
So another great reason to get the Carry Map app.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and my last question for you, when somebody calls you that's new to hunting in New Mexico, what's the #1 tip that you give them?
Like they've already drawn a license or?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's important. If you have the time, and everybody's time is different, and the ability to come down and scout or get familiar with the terrain that you're going to be hunting. But, there's really is no substitution for knowing the unit that you're hunting in. A lot of people, especially New Mexico natives, have grown up hunting certain units or certain areas, so they know where they want to hunt. But for those people that are out of state, call us, the local game warden should at least be able to point you in somewhat of a direction on where to start. And then, depending on the year, some years water holes are way more valuable than other years, depending on the rainy season. So if you can, come scout. If you can't, then get a hold of us and, we'll give you some pointers. So.
Anytime outdoor is a good time. For me, it's a big stress relief. So
right.
I love when I can get out. But
yeah.
Well, I think we have all of the questions that I've seen that come through here on Zoom, and I think we've got most of the questions off Facebook as well. But I really want to thank you for your time, Ben, and I know you have a family, and I'm sure you want to spend some time with them this evening, as well as a lot of the people that have joined us here. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. For those of you that are going to join us on Wednesday, we're going to be talking with Rick Winslow about bears, and specifically the bear draw and the over-counter bear hunting opportunities that we have in the state. And then next Wednesday, we're going to be talking with Casey Cardinal, and we're going to be talking a lot about turkeys, the draw, and the over-the-counter opportunities. But she's also our resident game bird biologist, and so we can talk about quail and some of those other species while we have her on. And like I said, the draw is open. Let me share those dates out so you guys can write them down. Give me 1 second. There we go. So you should be able to see those dates that we have, the really important ones that are coming up. Hopefully that's broadcasting. My screen's looking a little funny. But the draw is open now. You can start your applications now. The bear and turkey draw deadline is February 5th. And of course, the big game draw deadline is March 16th. Those deadlines are at 5 p.m. So make sure and have those ready to go sooner rather than later. And with that, Ben, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a great night and a great week. And thank you for everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Tristana. Have a good evening.
You too.